Warning: the following podcast contains graphic content that may be disturbing or triggering to some listeners. Discretion is advised. The papatangosierradelta podcast is available free of charge thanks to the support of Cracked Armor.
Their mission is to raise awareness for PTSD, TBI, and mental health to support those who struggle. By creating an army of warriors who represent the gear, their hope is that it will send a message to others that they are not alone.
Go to crackedarmor.com, say hi to Mark Long, read about the story, and find some research information about PTSD. And if you can, look good while supporting Cracked Armor by buying some gear.
(10-9). Did you say Papa Tango Sierra Delta? 10-4.
There's so much left to do, so many things I wanna say, and I say, don't make the change. If it rains every single day, I'll fight to blow it all away.
This is episode 30 of the Papa Tango Sierra Delta podcast. My name is Larry Payton, and I have been diagnosed with complex post-traumatic stress. This week, I'm going to give you a challenge. I want each one of you to go out and do something good. Just do something that you would step outside of your normal comfort zone, push yourself a little, but bring some good upon another person as you do so. I don't mean something as simple as sending off a text message for a buddy check or a quick phone call. I mean do something good, something that's going to impact another person's day, something that they're going to go, Jesus, wow, that really lifted me up today. I'm challenging you to do that. I want you to go out and do something good. It's not only going to help that person's day, it is also going to make a huge issue to your day. And hey, what the hell are we doing if we're not trying to recover from this fucked up situation of ours, right? Absolutely. The inspiration behind this comes from David Unger, a listener who's now a friend of mine, lives out in Altona, Manitoba, came to Winnipeg to meet up when I was there for the World Police Fire Games. David was just sitting in amongst us, hanging out for the day. You know, you could tell there's definitely struggling going on. There was no doubt there's struggling going on. Absolutely. And we had this lady come over in a wheelchair. She was very difficult to hear. She was older, no doubt, but she definitely had her issues as well. There was some kind of impediment. I'm not sure if it was speech, mental, or something else. But it was very difficult to understand her. We also had other people at the booth, so that Patrick and I were pretty busy. And out of nowhere comes David Unger, and he just gets down on his knee, and he leans into her, and he talks to her for about, it must have been 20 minutes or a half an hour. And you could just tell that it brightened her day. It just made a difference. She got into a big old conversation with him. David then, afterwards, just sat down like not much happened. Until I showed him that I took a photograph of his interaction. He had no idea I did that. I just saw it as being a sign of post-traumatic growth for David. I love the fact that he stepped outside of the comfort zone. It was amazing. And I want you to do the same thing this week. Step outside your comfort zone. Do something to make someone feel a little bit better. And then sit back and think about it. And it's okay that you feel good about it too. There's nothing wrong with that. On this episode, I have two shorter interviews. The first part of the episode, you're going to hear from Shaun Taylor. He is with I've Got Your Back 911 based in Ontario. If you haven't heard of these guys and girls, dear God, you need to look them up. Fantastic people. Shaun's an amazing guy. Take a look. They do some great things. The second half of the episode is with Aram, Choe, and Kristen Jauregui of 911 Strong podcast. They're based out of El Monte, California. Kristen was on the show before. This is actually one that was done before Kristen's interview. When I was on their show, they were on my show. We kind of did a co-show thing together. Aram Choe, great guy, fantastic guy. Again, you need to look him up on Instagram, 911 Strong. Yeah, he is all about being there for his brothers and sisters. So I'm going to call this episode the 911'ers. I've got your back 911 and 911 Strong podcast. I hope you enjoy the episode. Let's take a quick break. Please leave a rating at your preferred podcasting service. Hey, you know what's even better than a rating? If you take a moment to actually write a review. That'd be awesome. Okay, man, please just introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your journey and about I've Got Your Back 911.
Yeah, for sure. Shaun Taylor, I'm one of the co-founders of I've Got Your Back 911. We started it in 2014 because there was a span of about 18 months there where there was 131 first responders that had died by suicide in Canada.
Unreal.
We just thought that we would create a space online where people could go and maybe feel safe and be able to talk and be with some like-minded people that are going through the same thing and experiencing those same feelings. And within about 3 or 4 days, it just blew up. It went viral, and it's basically a monster on its own now, which is not a bad problem to have, I agree. But what we do is we have a whole bunch of items in our retail store in St. Thomas, in our online store, and through the sale of all of those items, we collect all that money and we donate it right back out to organizations and charities that help directly assist first responders with their mental health. So we are in our 8th year right now. We'll be 9 years in October since we launched, and we think that we're going to hit $1 million donated by the end of this year.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so it's a pretty humbling experience for sure. We've also created our own service dog program, and with that program, applicants can actually go on, they can fill out the application on our website. We will vet them. We obviously have to make sure that you're in a good place in your journey.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because essentially, if you can't look after yourself, there's no way that you're going to be looking after a dog. So through a couple interviews and vetting those applicants, then we pick a recipient, and it's a pretty amazing experience to bring out a puppy and hand it to that, 27-year vet, that person that's done policing in Toronto for 35 years, and we basically foot the bill for that puppy and 2 years of training, which is about $25,000 a dog.
Wow.
So we try to do 3 to 4 dogs a year.
Unreal.
And try to spread the word. We're out right now. We're out at the fire police games out in Winnipeg, and we're out here as a vendor and selling some of our merchandise and meeting all these athletes from all over the world and just trying to get it out there and trying to get the word out there of what we do and what we try to do. And all we try to do is just help one first responder, military vet at a time.
Look, I've seen the things you guys do, and it's absolutely amazing. I follow, obviously, you on social media, social media, and it's frequently I'm seeing you guys stand up with a check for someone, which is absolutely amazing. It's amazing what you're doing to give back. And so being here and representing that, I'm proudly wearing one of the shirts today.
We love you wearing our shirt, man.
It's good. It's all good. It's good. Yeah, man, it's really cool that you were here. It's good to meet you. And we're going to do a show together at some point, a full episode. However, Shaun, how is it that people can get their hands on I've Got Your Back 911? How do they, if they're not at the games, they're listening to this down the road, how do they get their hands?
You can find us anywhere on our social media. We're on Instagram, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook. We also have our website, our online store, obviously attached to our website. So you can learn all about, what we do, where we donate all of our money to, all those organizations that we work directly to help first responders. And we're always trying to create those inroads. We're trying to make sure that, any possible avenue that we can get into to assist people on a different level. Because as it's very service specific. Some services are very progressive and they really see the need for mental health and looking after their employees. And there's a lot of services that just unfortunately don't yet. So
that's true.
Trying to create those inroads,
it can
can be very difficult as well, trying to get through all those people in those high back leather chairs that make those decisions and don't want change.
Yep, you're right. Hey, you're hitting homers. You are hitting homers. But
Yeah.
Exactly. Absolutely, man. Okay, so get on support. I've got your back 911 there, supporting everyone else. I mean, that's a reality of what you guys do. Last thing, man, what's a takeaway from the games or a takeaway from people helping? I mean, there's a lot of athletes here, and we've seen in our days, I don't know if you guys saw it at your booth, but there's people that are obviously very comfortable about talking, and there's people that obviously are not.
Well, it's very interesting you say that because, seeing all these athletes from all over the world, somebody would approach our booth, walk by our booth, and we would just introduce ourselves and say hi and just try to create that conversation. And the exterior is very locked down.
Yeah.
They didn't really want anything to, do with talking to us until we actually mentioned what we do and why we do it.
Yeah.
And the fact that I'm a first responder, so I'm a paramedic in Ontario and I live this every day as well. So it's not like I'm just, talking from the hip and I really don't know what I'm talking about. I do live this.
Yep.
And my family lives it with me. So, but to break down that exterior, and then next thing you know, I find out, the gentleman has been in policing in New York City for 27 years, that he's done 2 tours of Afghanistan,
Wow. Yeah.
that he's been off 2 or 3 times,
It's
for
no wonder
his
he's
own
locked
mental
down.
health.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then it's a conversation that lasted probably 20 minutes. And then through the next 5 days that we've been here at the games, I've seen him 2 or 3 times, and he's actually gone out of his way to reach out and say, hey,
Awesome.
how you doing? How's your day going? Or just to say hi. So the games have been great, seeing athletes from all over the world, Korea, Hong Kong, Australia, Brazil's, I think, got 600 athletes
Huge
here.
Brazil team, yeah.
Unreal. Netherlands, everybody. And again, just to hand out our stuff, get our gear in people's hands, and raise some money so we can help some more first responders.
Phenomenal, man. Listen, you obviously have broken down some walls this week, which is fantastic and which needs to be done. And, I mean, hey, as another first responder, I appreciate it. I love the fact that we're getting the word out there and we're making this more palatable for people. We're trying to normalize this so that you don't have anything to be embarrassed about or
Sure.
feel shame of. And listen, man, I just want to say thank you for everything you guys are doing.
Well, and just to make one comment about that in itself, we've run into so many people that have said, you know what, I've had a diagnosis of PTSD and, I'm embarrassed, it makes me feel weak. And
Yeah.
we just try to change the concept and the perception of that comment in the fact that I don't look at it as a sign of weakness that you've got this diagnosis of PTSD. In my mind, dude, that's a badge of honor.
Absolutely.
I know what you've gone through
Yep.
to get that PTSD diagnosis.
Yep.
You know what?
I call it
I
earning my
applaud
scars. Earning my scars.
Absolutely.
And that's just, they're scars.
It's
but
a badge of honor, though, for sure it is.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm happy with them. I earned them. That's it, man. I'm
Yep.
good. It's part
Yep.
of who you are. Thanks a million, brother.
Perfect.
I really appreciate
Thanks,
it.
brother.
Safe travels
Look
back
forward
to
to
you.
it.
Cheers, man.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning into the podcast. If you have experience with post-traumatic stress and would like to join me for an episode, please reach out to me. You can contact me via direct message on Instagram, PTSD_podcast, or you can send me an email at papatangosierradelta@gmail.com. Cheers.
Hey friends, welcome back to the 911 Strong podcast. With me as always is my dear friend Kristen. What's up, Kristen?
Hi, hanging in there.
Yeah, today we got a special episode. It's actually a simulcast. We're recording 2 podcasts in one. Joining us today from the Papa Sierra Tango Delta podcast is Larry Payton. What's going on, Larry?
How's it going, man? Very happy to be here today.
Awesome. Hey, that phonetic spelling, if our guest didn't pick up on that, stands for PTSD.
That's right. Yeah. So it's a podcast that's hasn't been started too long ago. I've been podcasting for several years, but that was one I was not comfortable yet, I guess, admitting my own issues with.
Sure.
And so when I finally decided it was time to step up, yeah, I just wanted to be there for the brothers and sisters that are also struggling and have the same fears.
That's awesome. I can't wait to get into that because Kristen is a peer support counselor, and I actually sought some help, some therapy recently. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. But another interesting thing for our listeners about Larry is he is a Royal Canadian Mounted Police Officer. And for your listeners, Kristen and I work for an agency in Los Angeles County in California in the United States. Let's first benefit our listeners with some interesting facts about Larry. You've been doing police work for a long time, haven't you?
Yeah, so I will, come the end of next month, have 21 years completed. We'll be working on year 22.
been posted all throughout the country from the west right back over to the east. Yeah, a lot of history. I've done patrol work, and my first posting was a small town in Alberta. I did that for 4.5 years. Then I was with a specialized drug unit in Calgary, Alberta. Then I went with Customs and Excise, which was located in Ottawa. And now I am in Halifax with NWES, which is a weapons enforcement support team.
That's awesome. I mean, you've done it all, it sounds like.
I've never done the same job twice. I've gone from patrol right up through some specialty sections, and the development of expertise has been phenomenal. The training's been phenomenal. The opportunities have been phenomenal, and just the moving across the country has been great. So, yeah, it has been quite a career so far.
So, do you actually wear the uniform, the red?
Yeah, not every day at work. But
okay.
Yeah, so
but you have,
typically
special occasions.
Yeah, typically for me these days, unfortunately, my red tunic only goes on during funerals.
Sure,
that would be our ceremonial dress.
Okay, so
Very
like our
cool.
Class A's, yeah.
Aram, tell us about you, buddy. It's amazing talking to you, just in the sense that you have been doing your podcast for quite a while, doing some amazing things with brothers and sisters down there. I want to hear. This morning I took time to listen to an episode that you guys had recently done with an officer. I believe it was in Georgia who had passed away. I think it was 5 or 6 years ago. Was it?
Yeah.
Talking with his widow, which was very, very moving. But tell us about how it is you're taking on discussions and podcasts like that, and with the charity work that you're doing.
Yeah. So Kristen and I work for a municipal agency out in Los Angeles County. She's a dispatcher. She's one of the senior dispatchers at my station, and I'm a detective bureau sergeant. Her husband and I worked patrol together for a long time. He's a corporal on the SWAT team. He's the lead on the sniper team. And we carpooled to work for years because we worked on the same team. So we would have these awesome discussions. And because both of us had a presence, Kristen and I both had a presence on social media, we were like, one of these days, our conversations have to land on social media, because I think what we discuss is real. It's raw. It's not filtered. And I think people want to hear that. So, podcasts were a thing. It was an emerging thing. And I think at one time we tried to do a live discussion during our carpool. We were like, let's just put our discussion live and see what happens. And people gravitated toward it. They loved it.
Yeah.
And, we just, I don't know, Kristen, I think collectively we both invested maybe $1,000 into equipment and time. And we put something together. We didn't know what we were doing. We hired a photographer so we can get some pictures. And
nice.
We had a 3-camera setup, which was just a lot of editing, but we did it.
Wow.
Yeah.
And our opening week, we debuted in the top 100 in the U.S. charts, right under the Gary V podcast. Gary V was number 16 and we were number 17. So breaking into the top 1,000 was an accomplishment, then the top 100, and then making the top 25. And then the momentum just kind of kept going. We kept putting out episodes. We got out of the top 25, I think, just as fast as we got in. But we've maintained being the top 200 not only in the United States but in Canada too. So
exciting!
I know I'm real excited to actually speak to someone from Canada, especially because our audience is up there too. But I don't know, Kristen. We have audience members from Costa Rica, Italy, France, the most obscure countries. But yeah, I don't want to take up this whole introduction. But Kristen, do you have anything you want to add?
No, just a little bit, I guess, about me. He mentioned my husband. So I've been dispatching for a little over 23 years now. And another thing that kind of works for our podcast, giving different perspectives, is I grew up in law enforcement. So my dad, my grandpa, my uncle, all of us were in law enforcement, and I kind of fell into it. So now I have the perspective as a daughter growing up in it, and being married to a husband that's in it, and then, having my own kids, obviously. And so just completely immersed in law enforcement, so I can kind of give different, perspectives of the wife and kid and worker. So
I think it's phenomenal as well, Kristen, because a lot of people tend to understand the impact it can have on members, but really disassociate from what it's like being on that line as a dispatcher.
Yeah.
It's difficult. If you could just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it was kind of neat. I was just very fortunate enough to be sent to the FBI quarters in Quantico and just get trained with resiliency and wellness with me and another civilian, because they actually saw the impact that the calls we listened to had on us, and that they needed a civilian presence to go out and teach that to other departments. And so a quick way of just putting it is like saying, if you're reading like a really good book and you're just like really immersed in it, and then as soon as like, I don't know, something tragic happens, they rip out the rest of the book, and then you start reading the next one. So you never really know what's going to happen. Or, you know, they, to put it in different perspective, a movie, it's the same kind of thing. Like right when something tragic is going to happen or right after, they just pull the plug. And so a lot of us don't always have that closure, and those like calls sit with us for the rest of our lives and careers, some of them.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah, what's interesting about what Kristen left out was her and her partner that went, they were the first ever civilian dispatchers to ever go through the FBI Academy to teach this stuff. So, her dad was actually my chief who promoted me to corporal, my first promotion ever at the department. So, we have a history together, and I think that's what makes our podcast work. There's a lot of podcasts out there. There's a lot of law enforcement related podcasts, but I think that we bring a unique perspective in the sense that we have two different perspectives. We have one that is of the dispatch world, and we have a lot of audience members that are in that world. But not only is she a police wife, she's a police daughter and police granddaughter as well. Her brother was a police officer too. And now her cousin just recently became a police officer at our agency. So, having that kind of lineage gives you a different paradigm, but a different perspective as well.
Absolutely.
So our audience is made up typically of police officers, police wives, police spouses, but we have a significant number of people that aren't police that want to learn about that. And what better way to learn about it than through the perspective of someone like Kristen?
Concur. Yeah. Well, where are you going to get more perspective than from Kristen, in all honesty? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. From everywhere.
I'm just kind of the sidekick. I've been doing the job a little while, so I can provide that perspective. But it's not any different. My appeal to the show is the other cops listening. They tend to be on the same level. They understand when I say something. They're like, okay, I'm that guy. Okay. But it's worked, and our social media has benefited from it. Kristen's had opportunities to be on covers of magazines. Wow. She was on some really big podcasts.
Oh yeah, Anthony Padilla.
He's Padilla,
like, so he kind of caters to, I think, kind of the teens to the 20s kind of age group, and he just interviews everybody from all different walks of life and just asks them a bunch of questions. So he happened to ask about dispatchers, so that was really cool.
Yeah, I mean, cool. It opens us up to a bigger audience and gives people a person to be relatable to, and I think Kristen does a great job of that. And our show, we're in our fourth year of the podcast. Our first 2 years were a struggle because we were doing it for free, and but now we've got some sponsors, and we have a title sponsor that makes it very worth it for us. So. Yeah, I think we've finally broken into the legitimate podcast world. I think some of the other podcasts that are out there were like, okay, well, see if these guys will make it. And we've made it. So
I think you've showed them up. There's no doubt about
doing
that.
Pretty good.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's awesome. My podcast deals specifically with trying to make PTSD more palatable, I suppose, for lack of a better term. People are afraid to step out and talk. People are afraid of repercussions, of stigmas, of stereotypes, just generally afraid, which is it's an interesting reality based on the fact that a lot of people who have it are first responders, military, dispatchers, nurses, people who are generally warriors that have seen some of the worst and now struggle with being able to come out and say something about PTSD. I know there's a suicide epidemic in this country, and certainly there is down there as well. If you could tell my listeners what happens down there, how is the mental support for officers in the U.S.? Are you guys getting training at the ground level? Is time being taken to actually reach out to people? Are the support services established enough? And more importantly, I guess, why is it that you think that so many are unfortunately making that ultimate decision to end the day?
Yeah, I think Kristen is the authority on the subject, but I just, before I let her chime in, I think based on my experience, there's a stigma associated with asking for help, especially, we're a male dominated profession. And in this profession, the males kind of influence the culture. It's not just California. Law enforcement in America in general is, if you get a wound, you rub some dirt in it and move on. There's no crying in law enforcement. Hey buddy, I need to talk to you. Don't get weird on me. That's the kind of response you used to get. And we've gotten so far away from that. And Kristen can attest to that.
Obviously, there's still that stigma. It's going to be around for a while. I think, in my opinion, with my experience, it's usually the older generation that has that mindset. And I don't want to say unfortunately, but unfortunately, they're the ones that are either approving or disapproving getting peer support started. And some might just be saying yes to it because it's just a checkbox, because it's now a popular item that's being talked about. And so they just want to say, hey, we have it. And then they let the program suffer and fail. And it's looked at as a joke in a lot of departments because they're not doing anything with it. I think that some of the larger departments, it makes it harder. Like I know NYPD, unfortunately, they have a really good peer support program, but they're losing a lot of people to suicide as well.
Right.
Our department, we're a lot smaller. And we had a few tragedies recently within the last, more than 6 months now. And we just happened to have a peer support established. And we had just gone and started like asking for people to support it and what the reasoning was behind it. And then I think a month or less than a month, we had 2 of our guys killed.
Wow.
So I think that kind of nailed it home, like how much it's needed, because we had peer supporters from all over our county come and like help us within a few hours of our tragedy. So I do know that there's people going and talking to peer support, to clinicians. I know Aram has, I have, and we kind of let other people know just to kind of give them permission, like, hey, I'm open about it. And I think the more people talk about it and the newer generation that's okay talking about it, eventually it'll start shifting that way, but it's just going to take a lot of time.
Takes time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Kristen, do you want to talk a little bit about like some of the recent stuff? The 2 things that come into my mind that would have made me quit dispatching. Kristen was working the dispatch center when her husband was involved in a shooting. Shortly after that, he was involved in another shooting. And then, as she mentioned, 8 months ago, she was working the dispatch center when we lost 2 of our officers on the same call due to a shooting. Wow. A lot of people think when they think PTSD in the police department, they think of the officers. But you want to tell us from your perspective, Kristen, like what your mindset is? And
Sure. So obviously I know like what the dangers are, but I think we get complacent, and I really don't think it'll happen here, right? So my husband got into his first shooting, and I took the phone call, and then you hear the shots and him yelling in the background, and that kind of sat with me and frazzled me a bit. But then I kind of recovered okay, knowing he was mentally okay and he was physically okay. And then I had another guy ram the back of my husband's patrol unit. I wasn't working, so I had to wake up to the phone call of, hey, I'm okay, but this guy basically tried to kill me with his car. And then he had a third shooting, and he was okay there, so I was okay. And then we had our guys go, and I was on the radio. So I'm still struggling with the guilt, but I'm the one who sent them there. So I started the domino effect in my head. So my heart says one thing, my head says the other, and it's really hard to let that go. So I'm still trying to work through it. I went to a clinician. I did regular therapy. I did EMDR, and now I'm going to go back and do regular therapy again. And then just recently, I have my good days and bad, and it comes and goes. The week I got back after the shooting, we had another officer involved shooting in the neighboring city. And so my fear is what am I going to do? Am I going to freeze? Am I going to just run out of the room? Like, am I not going to be able to do my job? So luckily I called my husband because he was working, and I'm like, hey, go get the Bearcat. There's an officer involved shooting. He's down. Go get him. And so I didn't freeze, but at the same time, I'm hearing on the radio that they're taking bullets, and I'm freaking out. And I started tearing up in there. I still kept doing my job, but it took me immediately back to our shooting. And then just recently, we had another big fight, and the 2 officers involved, I didn't hear from them. And we just had the helicopter kept saying, they're fighting. They're still fighting. And working in law enforcement, when you're going to help somebody, that silence just literally is like eating away at you.
Yeah.
And not hearing my guys talk, it again took me back to me not hearing my guys that were shot. So I'm starting to get anxiety and stress, and my heart's dropping into my stomach. And then my husband was working that day too, and he put out the code 4, but he wasn't involved. So I still didn't hear from those officers. So that just kind of ripped open the wound all over again. So it's just a work in progress, but I'll be honest, I don't want to dispatch anymore. It's been like 23 and a half years and I'm over it. I don't want to do it. And if I'm being completely honest, I don't want to be a part of sending anybody to a call that they're not going to come back from, because that guilt sucks.
So for what it's worth, I am so genuinely appreciative that you were that honest. And there's a lot of people that feel the same way. I'm struggling with that now. I've been off since the first week of December. And as soon as I feel like I'm starting to find myself again, it doesn't take much to bring back kind of those feelings. And it's shitty to feel shitty. It's just, you hate to feel those things. And it's so many emotions that can't be put in. It's overstimulated, overwhelmed, but depressed, but anxious. And it's difficult. And I agree with you. I'm not, at this point, I'm very, very proud of what I am. I'm very proud of the people I've worked with, the organization for which I've worked. Very proud to be an RCMP officer at Mountie. My dad was a police officer for 30 years, municipal with the Royal Newfoundland Constabulary. Likewise, it's kind of like the family business. Absolutely, very proud. However, I'm also tired, and I'm tired, and that's kind of where I am with this. And I sort of want to bring it around, and this can come back to you, Aram, because Kristen made a comment. She just used a word that is very big in terms of law enforcement, and the word she used was complacency. And so I'd like to get your input on that fine line as an officer out on the street between complacency and being fully alert. And the reason I say is that we always go, never be complacent. The other side of it is, it's absolutely exhausting being fully alert all the time. Your thoughts on, the line between complacency and being ready to go?
Yeah, I think you bring up a valid point of it being exhausting. We call that hypervigilance, hyper-awareness. You may not realize it. The average person may not realize it. The average police officer who's starting out in their career may not realize it until they're told that this is what it is. So this is what it is. You're patrolling in the street. You're in a car. You're actively just being proactive. You're out there, and your eyes are moving. Your ears are moving. The hairs on the back of your neck are moving. That's just being hyper aware, and that's being hyper vigilant. You're anticipating the unknown, right? And that in of itself, you're not physically moving, but all your senses are moving at 100 miles an hour. Or kilometers an hour for your Canadian folks, but
much slower.
Much slower.
100 kilometers an hour.
So, but the point is, everything's moving at a rapid pace, much more rapid pace than it would if you were at home or at a safe place, right? For me, I work in an office. I supervise a detective bureau. Half the time, I don't even have the gun on my hip; it's in my drawer because I know I'm going to be sitting in my office. But when I'm on the street, it's completely different. My senses have to be super aware. I might be responding. We're one of those agencies where you don't have time to be proactive because you're responding. You're being reactive. We're going from call to call. So you're in a situation where you really can't be complacent. You're always turned on. So I think some of the places that you run into where you might find officers that become complacent are the ones that have time on their hands. When you're out there, you know what, today I think I'm going to go to Tim Hortons, and I threw that out there because I know that Tim Hortons is a place up there, or for down here, Dunkin' Donuts. You're focused on picking out which donut you want. You may not be aware of the person that's going to walk in the store behind you that's getting ready to hold the place up. And that happens, unfortunately, in places with less activity. In busy places, complacency happens in the form of taking shortcuts. So let's just say you're on a pedestrian check, and instead of putting your suspect in a safe position and you putting yourself in a position of advantage, you just want to get through the call. So that kind of complacency occurs for areas where it's even busier. You just take shortcuts. So somewhere in between not being active and taking shortcuts because you're too active, officers have to be aware that
like that. Yeah.
You got to be turned on. And where we work 12 and a half hour shifts. It's a very compressed schedule. It's a lot of hours in the day. And it's a lot of time to be turned on. It's a long time to be turned on for that long. So by the time we get to our 3 days, we're exhausted mentally and physically, and we have our 4 days to recover. And a lot of people, the average American has 2 days off, and they're thinking, "Wow, you have 4 full days." I'll tell you what. One of your days off is devoted to being at court. The other day off is devoted to working overtime because your department's short-staffed, like many departments are across this country. And the third day, you might be lucky enough to have it off to make it to your kid's ball game or the wedding that you're supposed to go. So it's a family event. And on that fourth day, if you're lucky enough to have that fourth day off, that's a day you should be resting, getting your mind ready to go back to work. But nope, you've got your chores that you got to do at home. You've got to, you got your homework to do. And some of our officers have second jobs or they're going to school. So really those 4 days off aren't really days off. They're just opportunities for you to be busier doing other things. Yeah, mental health had a lot to do. Now that I've been through some counseling sessions, I know self-care is a big component of mental health. So my advice to people that find themselves being complacent, it's not because you're lazy, it's not because you're not a good officer, it's because you're distracted and you're focused on getting to the next call or doing another activity. A lot of that gets eliminated when you care for yourself. So when you're fine, when Larry Payton, Kristen, Jauregui, Aram, Choe is fine, when things at home are good, when your finances are good, when your relationship is good, when your relationship with God is good, that translates to how you perform in the field. You're no longer looking for that shortcut to get to the next call. Now it's like, hey, I'm here present. I'm in the now. Let's take care of this now and do the steps I need to take. All three of us have over 20 years on the job. I'm in my 23rd year of my career. What's helped me from not being complacent is I've had the opportunity to move around. I've done patrol for a couple years at a time before I moved to a specialized unit and go back to patrol. So yeah, it's nice to have that change. So if you're from one of those agencies where you can have change and bounce around, I recommend doing that. Try something that you wouldn't normally do.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I've always found it so interesting to have to go start at the bottom and learn again just to work your way up. I mean, it sounds horrifying, but they constantly learning and evolving is so important to vacate the stagnation. I think the stagnation a lot of times is what leads to complacency as well. Is that you've done the same thing for 21 years, worked that street, worked that neighborhood, worked that patrol, and these people. That's when things can really go south.
And that's what, dispatchers, for instance, for a lot of dispatch centers, that position that you're in is the position you're going to be in for the rest of your career.
Yeah, it's stagnant. There's no moving. So, and I mean, I could be a trainer, but I've already done that and I don't want to do that. And then, being a manager. But in our department, you don't move around. So I'd be stuck on weekend graveyard for the rest of my career. And it's not worth it to me.
No.
So just to enter some numbers in some books, I'm like, no, that's not for me. So it's pretty stagnant in dispatch. Like, I'm glad that you guys get to move around, and sometimes I'm very envious, and I give my husband and Aram a ton of crap for it because I'm like, oh yeah, you had a hard day doing this. Yeah. Oh, I'm so sorry. Meanwhile, I'm tethered to a desk getting yelled at for 13 hours. So
it's definitely a job I couldn't do. I couldn't do it.
No way. No way.
Yeah. So 23 years of 13 hours of the same stuff, it gets a little redundant and kind of over it.
And then you got to go home and be a mom and a wife, and Kristen's got a ton of other activities that she does too. So she travels the country teaching resiliency training. So that's why when I referred to her as being in her wheelhouse, it really is. There's no other authority higher than training for this sort of stuff in our field than the FBI, and we're lucky enough to have Kristen have gone to that training and now teach it. So it's helped me.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the healthiest thing is just to find like an outside hobby that has nothing to do with work,
right,
that you just find joy in, and that you look forward to.
I couldn't agree with you more on that, Kristen, because I think that's a fatal flaw that a lot of police officers make, is because the job becomes everything. Aram, like you just said, those 4 days off, what are you doing? Pretty much still the job. And it's all the job. It's all the job. You end up talking to a lot of guys and girls that you work with because they're the only ones you can really talk about, the investigations that are going on or the crap that's in your head, what happened. They get it. Your dark, really dark sense of humor, they get it. And so you're always surrounded by the job. And then there comes that day that you retire. Right. And I think there's a lot of members that all of a sudden wonder, why is it that I've, been divorced twice? What is it I'm going to do with myself? And I don't know what it's like down there, but the rate up here is staggering of police officers, the short amount of lifespan they have from retirement to when they pass away. And I think that's a big thing, Kristen, is they just honestly don't know who they are anymore. It's this sort of little thing in the back of your mind, as much as you tell yourself that's not real, but your subconscious, you're like, yeah, this just is not going to be able to work without me. Like I'm big to this. And then all of a sudden you find out it's running without you. Yeah, I think a lot of members don't deal well with that. And then, like I said, don't know what to do with themselves anymore.
Yeah, and I think that's another thing that peer support needs to focus on as well. And I know there's some that do, but it's on the retirement portion of the community because, like you said, they're go, 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 and it's their identity. And then once they retire, the friendships don't happen anymore. You hardly hear from a lot of the people that you thought were close friends. Depending on how devoted they were to work, their kids aren't there for them because that person wasn't around during their whole childhood growing up because they needed that retirement or they needed that payout. Like you said, they're divorced, a few times over. So when they go home, all of a sudden it's going at 100 miles an hour and then now it's nothing. So now what do they do? So that's another factor of peer support that needs to focus on your retirees and their plan for what are you going to do when all of this starts coming to a slow or a stop.
Yeah, I want to bring up a point that you brought up about identity, Larry, and for our young people entering this career and even their spouses, because we have so many people that identify as a police spouse. That's who they are now. And this is the thing, for me at least, one of the things that kept me sane is being a police officer is not who I am. It's what I do. It's my job. It's my profession. It's my calling. I'm honored to do it. I still think it's one of the most noble professions out there. But it doesn't identify who Aram Choe is. So if you ask who Aram Choe is, I am a believer, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a friend, and I'm very passionate about what I do. I've molded my whole social media personality around this, but you got to really separate the job from who you are. And if you can't think, and when someone says, who is Larry Payton, and the only thing you can say is, I'm a police officer, then we have to do some soul searching, right? So for Joe Smith out there or Jane Doe out there, if you're new in this career, thinking about entering this career, really honor the profession by doing a good job at it. You have to be passionate about it, but think about what you bring to the table. What you bring to the table is who you are. That's actually who you are. That's your character, your competence, and your credibility, all molded into your profession. That's what you devote to the profession. But who you are at the end of the day is Aram Choe, Kristen Jauregui, and Larry Payton. And so I want our audience to know that. And I think most police officers agree with me in the fact that this is not my identity. That's why when you walk into a room, you always hear, oh, police officer, don't arrest me. You hear that, the wisecracks. It's like, it's not that funny to us because it's not who we are. It's what we do. So
I don't even like donuts.
I'd skip it if I can.
Yeah. I'm not gonna lie. I do love donuts, but I'm a foodie. I like food. But that's an episode for a different day. This has been really insightful, Larry. I realized that there was going to be some differences, but what's really brought us together is the human element, and we talked about that earlier. Deep down to our core, we're all really the same people, but we all struggle with the same things. PTSD is the name of your podcast, the Papa Sierra Tango Delta podcast, and we barely scratched the surface on that. But I'd love to have you back. Would you be interested in coming back?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Of course. Yeah.
Cool. And if our audience, our 911 strong audience, wants to hear more and see more about Larry Payton, where can they find you?
Track me down again at the papatangosierradelta podcast. You can find me on Instagram. You can find me on Facebook, PTSD podcast. You can send me an email. I'm even on TikTok now. I'm not very good at the TikTok, but I'm trying.
Sure.
And any of your podcast services, you'll be able to track it down. And
Awesome.
The only thing I'll say is that anyone who wants to talk and would love to come on and tell their story about their struggle would absolutely make the time to talk and be open with each other. And you may be surprised at who else you're helping.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks, Aram. Thanks, Kristen. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you guys today. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you.
Likewise. It's been a
Thanks for
pleasure
coming
having you
on.
on. All right, well, that ends it for this episode of the 911 Strong podcast and the PTSD podcast. If you liked this episode and you want to hear more, you can log on to the 911strong.com website. Find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and even TikTok. And you can find us wherever fine podcasts are played. And tell your friends about us, because we'd love to get your word of mouth out there, because we don't really advertise. Our best advertisement is you. So I want to thank you again from the bottom of our hearts, and we'll catch you next time. See you later.
Don't go away. There's so much left to do, so many things I wanna say, and I say, don't make the change. If it rains every single day, I'll fight to blow it all away.